Welcome to the Inside Out Money Podcast.
Can't even recognize this place. Too many pieces of our past mistakes.
Hi, I'm Maggie, and I believe real change starts from the inside out. So let's work together to improve our money and our lives from the inside out. We will explore all things money and our relationship with it. Join me each week with a rotating set of co-hosts, friends, and interviews. Let's jump in.
It's time, we going round and round and round and round.
Hey, Greg.
Hey, Maggie.
Welcome back to Inside Out Money. And this is a topic that people have been asking about for a while. I don't know how excited you've been to record this, Greg.
Probably less than you are excited for me to record it, but
yeah, I've been on him about this for a while, and we wanted to record this, and I teased it a number of times on Friends on Fire on Instagram, and I've gotten many people who have followed up and said, hey, when are you going to share the Greg Tesla story? Because I teased that there was a financial story behind how and why Greg, or we, if you want to say, bought a Tesla, and in the end, we were going to put it on the Friends on Fire podcast right around the time when Mike decided to retire from Friends on Fire. And so then at that point, I was like, well, let's just save it for Inside Out Money, which is what we're doing. So we're finally sharing this story that at least 4 people have been really wanting to hear. Okay. So I'm going to give a quick, just like legal warning. This is our own personal story we're going to share. Do not take this as formal legal or tax advice or any sort of legal or tax advice. Neither of us are tax or legal professionals. No one even employs us at this current moment in time. We are both unemployed and early retired. So use your own judgment on how you want to receive any thoughts we share in this episode, but consult a professional to make your own decisions about what you want to do. I should also say, for those of you who might be newer to this podcast, Greg, who is here with us today, you're being quiet so far, Greg, but you are here.
I am here. Yes.
Yeah. Greg's used to being the quieter one in our relationship. It's hard getting a word in a household with me and 3 girls. It's just a lot. So Greg is my husband. How long have we been married? 7 years, 8 years, 9 years?
No, not that long.
Oh.
We got married in 2017, July of 2017. So this summer will be 6 years.
You know, I'm bad with dates. I was recently quoting how long when we went plant-based or vegan together, and that was long because that was before we were married.
Right.
Okay.
That was January of 2015.
Okay, look at you with pulling out the important dates. I'm terrible with dates. Usually it's the opposite way in a relationship, but I like to celebrate our plant-based marriage. And I think that's like more important than our legal marriage.
You do have a bad memory. I've often thought that I could just sort of make up things about the history of our relationship and sort of insert them, kind of like Inception in that movie. You know, I could just sort of like start planting these seeds. And even if the first time I said it, you didn't believe me, I think I could over time kind of create a whole fictional history of our relationship.
Could.
Not that I would ever do this, but I've thought that it is possible.
Yeah, I'm not sure what end goal you could do it towards, but it sounds fun. You should try it. I mean, mix it up. You know, it might be fun for our relationship, like for me to figure out what's real and what's not. I'll probably go with it because I sometimes hate to admit that I can't remember things. Actually, earlier today, my mom was telling me she couldn't remember things. And like she was saying it in like a worrisome, she's getting older way. And I was like, not to discount your actual feelings that you're having some memory issues, but I was like, I think I'm pretty like healthy and I can't remember anything. So I was like, maybe it's just a genetic thing, a genetic problem we have. But anyways, speaking of can't remember, I can't remember where we were. I was giving people context of who you are, right? You are my husband. We early retired together about a year ago when I was 41 and you were, I always say you're 43, but you were 42 when we retired because it was the day before your 43rd birthday. You just really tried to eke it in to make it official as retiring at 42. That's who you are. So let's jump in to what you did. It sounds like you're in trouble, Greg. What did you do last year, about 6 months into retiring, when we should be conserving our resources? You know, we're early on this early retirement journey.
Well, I think we should actually start with before the expense, what I started doing.
Yes. It feels like we're unveiling some like dirty secret in our marriage.
I don't think of it as a dirty secret, but that is interesting.
I was just joking when you say like what I started doing. It's not a dirty secret. I it's actually
No.
something that's really cool. I'm excited to share it.
So a few months into early retirement, I started feeling a little unsure of what to do with my time and kind of having trouble even being kind of motivated. We've talked a little bit about this on other podcasts or interviews we've done, and just this listless feeling of not being sure how to use your time when you have so much more of it. I think for me, this was even more of a problem than it was for you, because you've got things that you kind of quickly jumped into, and I was a little more slow to commit my time to things. And so at some point thought, it might be fun to do some rideshare, Uber and Lyft.
And Greg, not to interrupt you, but you had this thought before you left work a little bit. Like you'd mentioned it a couple times, I think, that you might want to do something like that.
Maybe so. I honestly can't remember, but I guess I probably did mention it at some point. But
back to the memory thing, I could be totally wrong.
No, yeah, I may have.
But like in passing, I don't think I really thought you were serious about it. You would never seriously say. You had just sort of been like, oh, that's something I could do like when I want to. And
yeah, I probably had mentioned it in the past. And so long story short, decided to sign up and do some Uber driving, and started with Uber because you can do both Uber as a rideshare driver as well as Uber Eats delivery. And so kind of through one sign up was able to opt into either of those. And honestly, initially wasn't sure what I would prefer. I kind of was maybe a little leery of having people in the car and thought, oh, maybe I'll just do more deliveries. And
you were doing this with your Prius.
Yes. So at the time, had a Prius wagon, still a, nice, spacious, fuel efficient car. And so obviously when you're thinking about using your car for business and something like rideshare, the more efficient your car is, the lower your costs are going to be, your operating costs. And so the Prius was a good car to get started in just because it was fuel efficient and obviously lower gas costs associated with that, as gas costs are somewhere between $4 and $3 last fall. So started this in end of October of last year and have been doing it ever since. And it's been a fun way to just make a little extra money. It's probably the thing I like most about it is its flexibility. They talked about other part-time jobs, but really appreciate something that I can do as much or as little as I want to without having to call in and talk to someone and get approval for time off. It is just completely on demand. And so that is one thing I really love about it. And it's, even though I'm doing this through Uber, I'm an independent contractor of Uber. So it's my own little business. And so I'm kind of my own little boss and am able to do it when I want and when I want and for how long I want. So that's a few of the things that has made it an attractive thing versus looking at other part-time work.
I feel like there's one other thing you didn't mention that was one of your big pieces of interest in doing it also. I'm like teasing you on if you know what that is.
I don't.
You seemed a little hungry for some social interaction that you had been missing. You weren't missing most elements of work, but you were missing some of the social elements of interacting with more people day to day.
Yeah. And, honestly, I don't remember. I think I didn't say that just because I don't remember that as being a reason why I did it. It certainly has been a benefit of it.
That's a good point. This all goes back to how bad my memory is of like, you more talked about how much you've enjoyed that aspect, but you didn't maybe know that was something you were going to get out of this.
Yeah. Because again, I thought initially I might just do delivery. And so I think initially for me, it was just kind of to give me something to do, a sense of purpose, something in the day to say, okay, I'm going to go do this. I'm going to get out and go work and make some money. And while we certainly planned for retirement and have savings, it also is nice to have some income to offset kind of discretionary spending is the way I looked at it too, is, if I had some income, almost discretionary income, it can be there for when I want some discretionary spending. And so I think those were my big reasons for doing it. But yeah, as you mentioned, it's certainly been a really great way to have more social interaction. I think that is something that leaving a job, you lose those colleagues and those interactions you have every day. I do much more Uber rideshare driving than delivery. And so there's always people in the car and I'm getting to talk to people from all walks of life and all over the world, with Atlanta being such a travel hub. You've got so many many people here for conferences and other travel that you are meeting people both that live in Atlanta as well as people traveling to or through Atlanta.
So, Greg, before we get into some of the specifics of this, there's one interesting thing I just want to note, which you may not even realize, because I don't think you and I have actually talked about this. And I'm a little more, ingrained in the FIRE community, which is financial independence, retire early, than Greg might be day to day. But did you know there's a little bit, I can't remember the way, when we were on Chris's Inspire to FIRE podcast, he made some reference to this, but there's a negative connotation of people who have like early retired and fired themselves, but then do something to end up making money. Like, oh, you're not really early retired. Like you're just doing that now instead of your other thing. And first off, I think that's funny to me because it just is very focused on like an exact label. And there's only one way to do something. Like we have rental properties. We still have income coming in, and we will, even though, yes, we have financially gotten to a point of being able to early retire and not having to make money. It doesn't mean that there aren't things we might choose to do on our own terms when we want to, when we don't want to, or not when we don't want to, but when we want to and not when we don't want to, that will make money. But I just think it's an interesting thing that there's kind of some people that like get some flack. They kind of poo-poo, I can't think of a better word than that, the idea of someone who says they've early retired and then is doing something like what you're doing. And I just think it's kind of, I don't know, a better word than funny, kind of ridiculous, but funny.
Yeah. Well, I agree. I mean, to me, when you think of FIRE, I say this to people that are less familiar with it too. I think the FI part is so much, really should get more emphasis than the retire early part, just because to me, financial independence means you can do whatever you want, whether that's retire early, whether that's keep working, but because you enjoy your job, but not stress that if you lose your job for whatever reason, you're not worried about it. And so I agree. It is kind of odd that someone out there would criticize that or say anything about it. I think, the amount of time spent in Uber and money made is far less than my previous career, and the amount of stress is much lower. So to me, this is something I do to...
And the amount of freedom is 100% high, if you can get 100% higher, right?
Yeah, it is 100%. I mean, I do it when I want. I mean, there's days where I say, oh, I think I'm going to drive tomorrow, but I will wake up and just say, I don't feel like it. Or you'll have some idea of something we can do. And, oh, okay, well, let's do that instead. So it's totally something that, has huge degree of flexibility and freedom. And so, for me, it's, if someone views that as negative or as a indication that I'm not fully retired, then, whatever is really all I have to say. But I enjoy it. It gives me the opportunity to, again, make a little money when I need it, or when I have an idea of something I want to purchase, some little toy I want to buy, then I can make a little extra money and pay for it and not feel like I'm pulling money out of savings for something that's a want as opposed to a need.
Yeah. Ironically, some of your new toys lately have been related to the Tesla.
That is true. Yeah. It's the toy that keeps on not giving, but requiring more toys.
The toy that keeps on getting. So let's jump in. So you used to be doing this with a Prius. When and how did the Tesla concept even enter your mind? And tell us about that.
Yeah, well, I think we've always loved the idea of electric vehicles and always thought at some point an EV is going to be our next purchase. Just didn't think it would be this soon.
Yeah. I mean, to the point where for those who maybe haven't listened to this podcast or Friends on Fire before this, in our early retirement planning, I had a lot of scenarios of like, well, what if we get sick? What if one of our kids gets sick? What if there's just all these like what ifs that we plan for in addition to our estimated annual costs of expenses of, what it costs our family to live for a year. One of my what ifs was like, well, what if we need to buy a Tesla? Because what if I really just can't live without a Tesla anymore?
Right.
And even when I was working, when we were saying, we kind of had like one more year syndrome for a little while. Some of my one more years was like, well, I'm further padding things so that like I can enjoy a luxury like a Tesla if I want one. But I kind of thought maybe we'd like get the kids into college or something first, or who knows. So
yeah, well, so I'll try to synthesize this a little bit, but after doing Uber for quite a few months, well, it was maybe a couple months, really. Actually, no, because it was before December.
I'm going to call you on that. You did it for like a month and a half, I feel like,
That's
before
right.
you.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, like you pretty quickly escalated to, ooh, couldn't I do this with a Tesla?
Yeah.
It'd be more fun.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've been driving about 3 days a week at that time and still right around there. It sort of varies. But so doing it not full time, but also not only once in a blue moon. I mean, it was a regular part of my week. About 3 days I would be out driving.
Just to clarify, you were doing it about 3 days a week, part-time those days even. So you were doing it like while the kids were at school for like 4 to 6 hours tops.
Yeah. About 4 to 6 hours. Right. I think I'm trying to make it even sound, I have no good way to really justify it or explain why. It was more just that I really wanted it, and I'm struggling with how to.
I don't think you need to justify it. It's, it's personal finance. I more think it's an interesting story of how you came to the decision. I can tell you my observation quickly. You were driving in the Prius. You had done it for at least a month and decided that you liked it enough that you wanted to continue. You liked the little bit of kind of extra discretionary.
Right.
You liked not feeling guilty that you wanted to go buy a new pair of running shoes or whatever. And you realized that it would be, the thought, we always wanted a Tesla, right? So all these things were kind of converging at once, but you realized the economics that you could deduct. But Tesla was doing some different sales. You also realized you could deduct some portion of the expense as a business expense because you were doing ride sharing. And you started to look more into that and research that and realize you actually could upgrade from a Prius to a Tesla for a reasonable investment. It wasn't like you were going and buying a $50,000 Tesla brand new, right?
Right.
You weren't out of pocket $50,000, which is something we wouldn't have felt comfortable investing in at the time.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. So why don't you talk through the financials at a high level and how you actually decided to buy this Tesla? Like what financial equation at a very high level made you feel like this was a decent investment for you at the time?
Several things kind of came together. One is looking at the trade-in value of or trade-in or sale value of our current Prius. And as you may know or may not, depending on if you've bought a used car or looked into it, but prices for used cars have been very high over the past year, really since COVID. And so there was this recognition that we have this Prius that's relatively low mileage at this point that we could sell for a pretty good amount. There is, at the end of the year, Tesla started running some discounts on their cars because the tax credit had in essence expired for Tesla, but they started reducing prices to boost sales. And so they were running a sale. So that kind of prompted me to say, oh, okay, maybe now is the time. And I think the biggest thing is just looking at it from a tax scenario, and that we realized that we were able to do something called accelerated depreciation, which means that you can buy a car for business use, and especially for hire use, which means you're using it as a taxi or a rideshare vehicle, and you can depreciate that car in the first year you buy it. That isn't always a beneficial scenario if you're going to be at the same tax bracket 5 years from now as you are in the current year. But for us, we were in a higher tax bracket last year because we had still worked in our higher paying jobs up until May. So for us to be able to deduct the value of that car depreciated in year one and actually offset some of our income was really beneficial. So that was the biggest thing too. So you combine the trade-in value, the sale price of the car, as well as the money that we saved on our taxes, and we were able to upgrade from a used Prius to a brand new Model 3 Tesla for,
So Greg, one of the things you said that I just think is worth double clicking on, for us, we were in a very unique scenario where we strategically realized we had a short window for some pretty big tax savings in what we believe is our last year of high income. So like Greg said, we left our jobs in May of 2022. So we had half a year of 2 jobs of a higher income, and we don't anticipate ever having that again, right? Never say never, but our forecast for our future is that we will never make that much money again. So this was our last shot in a really high tax bracket to have a benefit that we wouldn't get in 2023, where we all of a sudden have a low income for the first time in our lives. And so that was like a big push of why we were like, as soon as you sort of realize this opportunity, like within a week, all of a sudden we had a Tesla, and we had to get it in December because we had to acquire it in 2022.
Right. Thanks for kind of zooming in on that point, because I think that really is something key that's really only pertained to doing it in 2022. Had we waited, it really wouldn't have had had that same value.
So can you run through the numbers at a super high level? What was the sticker price on the Tesla we bought?
Yeah, so all in, it was about $47,700.
And that was for a 2023 Tesla 3. It was basically the cheapest Tesla you could buy. It was the lower mileage, lower battery size.
Yeah, lowest range, but still 270 miles of range. So more than I ever do in one day of driving. And as we'll talk about in other episodes, just still able to do road trips with it. So ticks all the boxes of what we need. But yeah, that is the lowest price Tesla. Now, they have come down significantly since then. Obviously, hindsight's somewhat 2020, but again, we wouldn't have gotten the tax benefits. So even waiting to buy it today with the lower prices, we still wouldn't have done quite as well as we did with our tax savings on this. So $47,700 to buy it. We were able to sell the Prius, and I say we, but really it was you, Maggie. You're like our salesperson extraordinaire. So you were able to sell it used at a really good price, as opposed to doing a trade-in, which is the easier option, but you always get less for that. So
I was like not willing to do the trade-in. What was it with the trade-in offers we were getting? Were like 18,000, 19,000 at the high end.
And we ended up selling it for 23,000. Yes.
Ironically, we ended up selling it to our direct next door neighbor, which I think is a fun addition to it. So I was really sad to let that car go, and our kids were actually, one of our kids was really sad about it. And I was like, well, what if our neighbors buy it? She's like, oh, that's great. It's right next door. We see it drive by our house. They love it. They're happy. We're happy. It was a fair price. For both of us, it was a fair price. They would have paid more at a dealer and we would have gotten way less. So I felt, I'm weird about like when I sell something like that, like I want it to go to a good home. Like I'm very emotionally attached to that vehicle. I loved it. I loved her.
I think you go visit it sometimes, probably.
I don't, but I definitely like watch. Like when she goes by, I'm like, I'm doing that like head turn out the front window where I'm like, oh, hey, what's going on?
I'm thinking of that
meme. Yeah.
And so it's you in the middle and the Prius and the Tesla and you're with the Tesla, but you're looking at the Prius.
I know. It's like, I still love you, Tessie. And I do. I could talk about my love I have gained for the Tesla more than I expected. But okay, keep going with the financials.
At the end of the day, between the savings on our taxes and the sales of the Prius, we were able to upgrade from a 2016 Prius to a 2023 brand new Tesla, coming out of pocket $10,430, which again, if it was all about the dollars and cents, some listener may be listening and say, yeah, but you'd probably still be better off with the Prius. True. I can't argue that. But for the joy we get out of the Tesla and having a new car that we really love, the $10,000 out of pocket felt like a very reasonable price to pay.
Yeah, I agree. And I think part of your mentality, Greg, was you will earn that amount in 1 year driving at the rate you were driving, right? You were driving like 10 to 15, I don't know, maybe 10 to 20 hours a week tops. And you'll earn that much money working. You don't even work all year, but even with all the time you take off, you'd earn at least that much. So basically between the tax savings, the Prius trade-in, like you said, and 1 year of your Uber Lyft earnings, that car paid for itself. You could argue paid for itself, right? We still upgraded an expense. Could you have made more had you kept the Prius, arguably? Or not
right.
arguably,
I mean, that 10,000 would have been 10,000 in my pocket versus 10,000 to pay for a car. But to me, that felt like money well spent. And, it's a very economical car for Uber driving as well, just because the gas savings, we charge it at home. To charge it, a full battery charge on our plan that we have through Georgia Power costs us about $1.50 to $1.20.
That's to fully charge it.
Right.
And that's just for people who are interested in this. Georgia, like many states have a program like this, but we had to sign up for a specific program with Georgia Power. Do you remember what it's called, Greg?
It's basically called an EV rate plan.
And you get this really cheap rate in the middle of the night. It's from like 11 p.m. to whatever time in the morning. And you can actually, like, whenever Greg wants to, he can plug the car in the carport. And in the Tesla app, it's set to not start charging until 7 o'clock, because that's when the cheap rate kicks in, because they're trying to give you off-peak electricity at a cheaper rate, which is it's good for them, good for us. And so it's a really great setup. I think another interesting thing, because this is a money podcast, I think it's fun to share some of the specific costs.
Well, the only thing I was going to say, too, is compare that $1.25 to the same amount of gas to drive for 270 miles in our Prius, which got good mileage. It was about 40 miles per gallon. the still $23.62 basically, with gas prices of $3.50, which is roughly what they are now. I think they were actually higher than that at some point in the fall. But so you're comparing $1.25 to $23. So the operating costs are significantly lower, as well as not needing oil changes, which again, if you're not driving much, you think, oh, well, how expensive are oil changes? But when you're driving a significant amount, you hit that 5,000 mark more frequently than you would think. So that's another great part too, is really the lack of maintenance with an electric vehicle.
And then the other financial piece, which since this is a financial podcast, we'll share, is there was an upfront capital cost, if you will, of getting an EV charger, particularly the Tesla EV charger, set up in our carport. We live in an older home, and it turns out, as many electricians told us, one of the most difficult homes they've ever wired for an EV. One person kind of just walked away and was like, good luck, you should get some other quotes. I'm not doing this. But we finally found someone. We had to put some holes in some walls, and we were basically running. So what I'll say that's interesting is on average, I think even like the Tesla guy at the dealership was like, he was estimating like usually it's a few $100 to maybe $500 tops to get your, what do you call it? The charging
wall charger.
Yeah. The wall charger. We have to buy the wall charger. How much is that?
That was $450.
You buy that from Tesla.
Right.
So we knew that was $450, but then we had to pay an electrician to install it because you've got to run, what's the voltage?
Oh, we need a 50 amp line coming directly from your breaker box. It has to be a dedicated line from your breaker.
And some people's breaker box is like in the garage. That's great. That might cost you $250 for a electrician to install it. And you need, for the Georgia Power Program, you need a legit electrician to install it. They have to fill out this paperwork that that they installed it properly and directly from the breaker and all that. Our breakers like on the other side of the house from where our carport is. And there's a lot of concrete in between there and a lot of finished basement walls. And so they had to do a lot. It was $1,400. It was pretty, at one point we got a quote for like $3,000 though. So it's funny how your mind works. I love the like psychology of money, because when we originally got a quote that it was going to be at least $3,000 from that first guy who basically was like, don't hire me, try to find someone that can get more creative. Once you find out it's $1,400, you're like, oh, I'm getting a deal. Like first I thought it was going to be $500. Then I'm like $3,000. Holy crap. And then we asked that, you remember we asked that guy, what would you do? Cause he kind of was stumped on like how to install it. And he had this terrible method of like running crap all around the house, like outside the house. And I was like, well, what would you do if this was your house and you had a Tesla? He goes, what do you say, Greg?
He said, I wouldn't have bought one.
Yeah. And I was like, well, we already own one.
Yeah. So. A little late for that, but thanks.
So anyways, when you go from $500 to hearing $3,000, then all of a sudden $1,400, actually, I was like happy at that point, because it's like an anchor point of, okay, Greg, let me ask you two other financial questions about this. And then I want to get into the emotional portion of it, which I like to talk about more. So the first question, we glossed over that we did what's called bonus depreciation or accelerated depreciation, but talk about some of the different ways somebody could depreciate a car versus what you were able to do because you're doing rideshare and just how we chose to do it.
Okay. The first thing I would say is that there's a choice you have to make on how you show your expenses related to an automobile. That is either mileage or actual expenses. And so for many people, doing mileage is going to be the better way to go.
And Greg, that's not just for ride sharing. That's for like anybody who owns their own business and has expenses with a car.
Right. Exactly. Anytime you're using a car towards your business, you can choose how you're going to do that. And mileage is the easier way to go most of the time, especially if your car is minority use for business, just because the mileage rate that the government comes up with is actually pretty generous, and it includes everything. It includes your gas, your maintenance, the depreciation on the car. And so most of the time that's going to be the way to go. It's pretty generous and it's much easier to do. You just track your mileage and you multiply the rate times the miles, and it's usually the way to go. For us, because we wanted to do this depreciation, we went the actual expense route. So you're tracking all of your actual expenses. So I'm saying, how much electricity do we use to charge the car? If I need to replace the tires, I will show the expense of the tires. And all of that will be multiplied towards the usage of the car. What percentage of the total miles driven are business versus personal? So for us in the first year and even so far the second year, so somewhere around 80% of the miles being driven on our Tesla are business versus personal use. And so if I need to replace the tires on the car, I can then expense 80% of the tire expense as a business expense.
And that 80-20 is interesting. That may be pretty unique to our current lifestyle setup. So you're putting a lot of miles on the car doing ride sharing compared to what we use for personal use. Somebody who has a long commute to a job every day, that mix might be very, very different, right? We don't have jobs anymore. Our schools in our community are pretty close. We walk a lot of places, and we have another car also. And so 80-20 is a pretty conservative estimate for us. And you got to be careful about having, like, we did some pretty detailed math around taking road trips every now and then, and like, what does that look like? But it's just that percentage is something that you would have to come up with on your own with your best estimates of what you use for work versus personal.
Right. I mean, you have to track it either way every year, but some of it too, like Maggie said, is our forward thinking. Is that 80-20% gonna, yes, that was true in 2022, but is that gonna hold true going forward? And we felt like it would. And again, a lot of it is unique to rideshare driving, because when I go do work for 6 hours, all of those 6 hours are in the car driving. Many other businesses where you buy a car, you're not using the car every minute you're working. As Maggie said, that 80-20 is probably unlikely in most other businesses, unless it is a business of transportation utilizing that vehicle.
And Greg, there's also this other rule that a lot of people are familiar with. It's from section 179 of the IRS code. And so a lot of people know it as like rule 179. It's related to how you can deduct certain heavy vehicles. It's meant for like SUVs. Actually, I think it was designed for farm equipment and actual heavy equipment that are tied to someone's job. But a lot of people have used it to buy, it has to be a car over 6,000 pounds, which is not what the Tesla is. And so we're doing a very unique setup that's related to this ride sharing that Greg has been doing. But I just thought I would mention that because more people tend to be familiar with that heavy vehicle like SUV rule that, again, was designed for something else, but a lot of people just use to buy expensive cars and be able to kind of expense them to some extent.
Right. And as Maggie said, I'm certainly not a tax accountant by any means, but have had to learn a lot about this. When you buy capital for businesses, you can use accelerated depreciation for most types of capital. Cars have their own sets of rules, I think, because they were heavily abused probably. So they basically limit how much you can accelerate or how much you can depreciate in year one. And as Maggie said, if the car is over 6,000 pounds, you can do it all in year one. And I think the idea was that that's heavy equipment. Now it's people buying G-Wagons and Tesla Model X's and very expensive heavy cars.
And by the way, it's totally legal and legit. And it's just, there's a lot of tax laws that were created for one thing and then kind of used for other things, creatively used for other things.
Right. So with a normal car under 6,000 pounds, there are limits to how much you can depreciate in year one. But when the car is specifically used for hire, meaning as a taxi or as a rideshare vehicle, those limitations are different and you can accelerate depreciation to year one, unlike if it's a different type of business use for a car. And there's other things related to it as well. I mean, there's a lot you get into as far as recapture. If you stop using the car for business or you sell that car, you have to, and you've already depreciated the whole vehicle in year one, and in year two, you say, well, I'm not going to use it anymore. You can't carry that depreciation forward to the future. You actually have to recapture that as income because had you not accelerated it, you only would have captured, 2 years of depreciation. So there's a lot to it.
Hey, Greg, said another way, if you decide to quit doing Uber or Lyft next year or in 2 years, we will have to adjust our taxes and pay back some of the tax savings that we got in 2022.
Right. Well said. Yeah.
Let me ask you the final financial question, and then we're going to bring this home, okay? Because I was actually at lunch with someone today, and this was like their most curious question, which I didn't even think about. What are you on average making per hour? Like, what's your average hourly rate that you earn?
Yeah, it's a good question. And earnings before other expenses. And again, with Tesla, other than depreciation, my expenses are almost nothing. I mean, some tires, replacing the tires I'll have to do, and electricity is almost a non-expense given what we covered earlier. So I'm making somewhere between $23 to $30 an hour, depending on what time I drive. Weekend evenings is where you can make the most money.
But that's where you're doing the least of that.
I personally am doing the least of that because that's where you're getting people coming back from the bars. I don't mind taking people to the bars. I don't want to take them home from the bars.
Well, also, you're doing the least of that because that's not when you're available.
Well, that too.
You're available when the kids are at school.
Exactly. I didn't retire early so that I could not see my family on the weekends, you know? So I mostly do early morning driving, and it's still pretty profitable. It's busy, lots of airport runs, taking people to work. Early morning driving, somewhere between $23, $25 an hour.
You have complete freedom over your time now, and you were otherwise going to be hanging out and making nothing. And so that $20 to $30 an hour that you're now making and entertaining yourself. And I kind of enjoy when you leave the house sometimes during the day. Greg knows this. I'm an introvert. I like alone time. So there's a lot of side benefits to this. Let's segue into what you have learned and experienced through this, because I think that to me is one of the most fascinating pieces of this journey for you. Tell me about your experiences driving and like who you're driving and just what you've experienced.
Before I specifically answer that, I will say, in the general experience, I've really enjoyed it. It has been a lot of fun. I have felt like it gives me something to do with my time. I get up early for me, probably not early compared to some people, but earlier, and I get out and I drive for several hours. And then when I get home, it's like feel like I've been productive. So that kind of flows into the rest of my day. And I think I'm a more productive person than I was when I was not doing this. I think some of that is just having some more structure to my day. In general, I've really enjoyed driving Uber. And so, yeah, it's just interesting. You drive so many different kinds of people from all over, the city. And there's really no one type of ride people or one purpose that people are using Uber for. It's not just being used by someone who's using it to go to lunch or go out to dinner and doesn't want to drive. There's a lot of people that utilize Uber for their everyday mode of transportation. Anyone who lives in Atlanta knows that public transportation is not as good as it is in other large cities.
It's not like logistically feasible. Like it actually cannot efficiently get you from certain points in Atlanta to other points in Atlanta. Like it's not
the subway
a well
system
set up.
Is very incomplete. If you live on the subway system and your job happens to be on the subway system, great. But that's not
the average
case.
person.
Yeah, for most people. So, and then there's also a lot of business travelers in Atlanta. So you're doing a lot of business travelers and everything in between. Someone whose car is broken down, they need a ride to the shop. They're picking their car up. Just all kinds of different reasons people are using Uber.
By the way, I loved every day. You would come home and I'd be like, who'd you drive today? And you'd like tell me kind of stories. And I just loved hearing them because it was just kind of like an interesting dynamic and additional piece of texture to our day of something to talk about, especially because you don't get home. Like we used to go to jobs every day. We'd come home. We'd have all sorts of stories about something where this happened and this. And it's like, you don't have that. We're just at home living like the same life. It's like, I don't need to like ask you about your day because I was like, I was here all day with you, dude. Like, I know what you did. I don't need an update.
And a lot of it was on the couch for me.
Yeah. But it was, or you'd go to the gym and like you come back from the gym an hour later. I'm like, I don't need to hear about the gym because you were only gone for an hour, But it is true. It's a funny dynamic of early retirement. It added some interesting, I can't think of a better word than texture to our day because you would come home after a few hours gone and it was like, absence makes the heart grow fonder. It's like good to see you after you were gone for a little while, not too long, but a little while. And we'd have something new to talk about. It was kind of fun. You frequently would tell me just kind of stories about different people. And I was surprised by the multitude of different situations where someone needs a ride that I just hadn't thought about. But I think the biggest thing that I quite honestly underappreciated was how many people in Atlanta, like you said, you kind of need a car to survive in Atlanta. Well, how many people used it instead of owning a car? They don't own a car because A, they can't afford a car, or which by the way, we frequently acknowledge and appreciate and recognize the privilege that we have, that we can afford a car, and it is a very nice luxury to have. But there's a lot of people who can't afford a car. And also, I started doing some math with you on this. They might be able to afford a car, but they might have actually realized it's actually cheaper for the amount of time they need to be in a car to just ride share. You knew what people were paying to get a ride from where they live to work. And I was kind of doing the math and I was like, oh, wait a minute, that might actually be cheaper than a car payment. And then there's no maintenance. It's at your convenience. And so I was just fascinated by the number of people who use Uber or Lyft for just basic transportation needs to get from where they live to their place of employment.
Yeah, there are a lot of people that utilize it to get to work or to go shopping or just do basic kind of necessities. And it's tough. I sometimes wonder, is it cheaper than them owning a car? But certainly if car ownership is not something that is attainable, I think it's nice that there is a mode of transportation that is at demand and, priced reasonably and there as an alternative to public transportation, which is certainly cheaper, but is definitely not on demand and not always efficient for people.
Yeah, I think it's a good point, Greg, of we don't know whether it's a thoughtful decision for people to do or whether it's their only choice, right? And that is just, a reality. And I remember early on you came home and you were like, oh, I took a mom and a child to school because she had a parent-teacher conference. And typically that child probably rides the bus to school like our kids do. And that parent doesn't go into their school. And who knows where that parent works and how they get to their daily place of employment. I feel like I want you to tell these stories, but I'm going to tell them for you. Like you drove someone to their dialysis treatment one day. You drove someone who was getting their cancer treatment. And they were just like, I think you come home with the most heartwarming stories where like people are sharing their thoughts about life with you. It's like you have this 10 to 30 minutes to sometimes an hour with somebody in the car. And a lot of people talk to you a lot and share what's happening in their day and their life and their perspective.
Yeah, no, they really do. And I try to be very kind to people that ride with me. Someday I want to do something meaningful post-retirement. You could argue driving Uber is not exactly that. I mean, it's not changing lives. It's not making the world a better place. But I do feel like if I can show kindness to every person I interact with, that's just a little step in the right direction. And so I think when you are kind to people, they do open up and they share things. And I think for people having a place where, they're able to talk to someone that they're probably never going to see again, it's amazing what people do talk about. I've had a lot of amazing conversations with people. Like you said, people leaving cancer treatment. Another time I picked a woman up who was just leaving her check-in with her oncologist. And after she left, I said, we were talking for a minute. I said, how was your day? And she said, it's really a great day. I just found out that I'm cancer-free. And I was the first person she told. And then she quickly got on the phone and told her family. But to be there for a moment like that, it changes your perspective on things. When you see the joy in someone who's battled cancer and is saying, I'm cancer free, and then you hear them telling their family and you hear them crying in joy as they tell their family. And it's just super cool. And it's things that, as I've been going through this kind of journey of like, what do I do next? And a lot of thinking about life and what's important in life, hearing those kinds of conversations are really amazing. So they've been great. And I think the other thing I would say is that I probably have gone through stages where I spend too much time on social media. And I think you see the worst in humanity often on social media, whether it's political and you see the comments people put out there and the way they treat each other. And it's easy to think humanity is just bad. There's not a lot of good left. And I've ridden with so many people from so many different walks of life. And it's really honestly made me believe in the good in humanity, that when you take away all the external crap and the social media and the politics and the, way we get fired up on social media due to headlines and inflammatory reporting and insensitive comments that build on top of each other, and that there's still so much good in people and wisdom too. I mean, I learned from everyone I drive with. It has certainly made me more hopeful about people in general, which has been good. And so I feel like I learn from people. I'm often humbled by people and how hard they work and the things they do and the way they go about living their lives, and often with not as much privilege and opportunity as I've had. And it makes me feel humbled by people and the good in people. And so it's been a really cool experience for me. And I think that's the kind of stuff you talk about, the numbers, and that's kind of fun, but talking about these kinds of things are what sort of make me kind of light up. And it's just fun and I learned so much.
I think it's really cool that you're doing this. And I think the way you just said that was just very nice. And I like you, Greg.
Oh, well, thanks.
Glad I'm married to you.
Well, I like you too, and I like that you're supportive of me going and doing this. There are some people that would say, you're early retired. What are you doing? You shouldn't go do this. And you were very supportive, and I appreciate that very much.
Thanks. That would be a good note to wrap things up on. But I just want to share like a couple quick stories. A couple quick ones. One, you were talking about like you really want to do something more purpose driven eventually and you don't know what that is yet. But I was thinking like one of my favorite stories is there is a guy that was former military and you drove him, and I'm pretty sure you were driving him to do security at a strip club, which is just kind of funny. And you had like a pretty in-depth conversation with him, and you ended up like referring him to get a job where you used to work, where you knew they were looking for more people in security. And like he sent you his resume, and like, so I mean, you when there are opportunities to help people, you have been being proactive.
Yeah, that was neat for sure. And don't know if he ultimately ended up working there, but yeah, I followed up with him and got his resume and sent it to Piedmont. And he was just such a nice person, a veteran. And yeah, it's been neat. I mean, another kind of cool story is I drove a gentleman who had been a professor in Egypt and left after the newest, just do a lot of the political change in Egypt. Was just talking a lot about persecution of people who have opposed the current leader of Egypt and his fears around that. I mean, it was fascinating. It was a fascinating conversation, and it was really neat. Another one of those ones that really stays with you and makes you think, man, things are not perfect here, but
yeah,
they could be so much worse.
Yeah, it gives you a lot of perspective and just appreciation for what you have. So not a good segue, but the last stories I want to share are just around Uber Eats, because I think they're interesting. Like I know you early on said you didn't know if you were going to want to do like rides with people or picking up food and, being by yourself. I think you like Uber Eats is just like, I don't know a better way to say it. It's kind of a shit show. And I'll explain what I mean by that for what it's worth, because I went and did it with him once. But two quick Uber Eats things, because you really you've done Uber Eats like a handful of times, right?
Yeah, I do it very, very infrequently.
I'll tell you what I mean by saying that it's a shit show. But I had an idea that I threw out to Greg once where we have a 14-year-old, and it's really hard at times to connect with a young teenager and like want to like that you have like things that that you want to do and that they want to do. And, our kids have been around people that have been talking pretty openly about money for a while. And so they have a pretty good built-in like work ethic and awareness to be responsible with their money. And so I had said, hey, when you do Uber Eats sometime, like I wonder if it would be fun to do it, like an interesting thing to do with our 14-year-old. And you're in the car together. You had kind of proposed it to her and she was like interested in doing it. And again, when your daughter wants to spend time with you, take it, no matter what it is doing, it's like something different and interesting to do. And the deal was too that you split the money, right? You split the profits. Right. And so for her, she was like, oh, cool. I'll hang out with dad and I'll make some money. So you guys have done that a couple times.
We have. It's been fun. And again, as a 14-year-old, I mean, she's not really doing the work. She's definitely not driving.
Yes.
And she's not, delivering the food to people or anything like that. But, she's with me and she'll come into the restaurant with me when I pick up the food and it's fun. And so I think she gets to sort of, more than anything, we get to spend time together. And because we're kind of like getting a new delivery and it gives us something to kind of work on together versus just kind of sitting in the car. So
like playing a video game together or something.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's fun.
Okay. And so on that note, I had suggested that and they tried it and it was fun. And so after they had done that, it was Valentine's Day. And this was months ago. And I'm way too frugal to go out to dinner on Valentine's Day. Like not just frugal, but like it's just it's a busy day to go out. I don't need a bunch of money spent on me. Greg knows never to have flowers delivered to me on Valentine's. Like you could go buy flowers and bring them to me, but don't buy like overpriced flowers that are jacked up for Valentine's. Like he knows the rules of how to treat a Hallmark holiday like Valentine's Day with me.
No, and it's true. And we've not gone out to dinner for Valentine's since, I think when we were initially dating, we did a few times, but no, we've not actually gone out to dinner on Valentine's in ages. Yeah.
So we would that's like a regular night. We sometimes might splurge and go out to dinner like a week later and call it Valentine's Day or something, but we would never go out the actual day. It's way too crowded. I said to Greg, I go, hey, for Valentine's Day, since like we're not going out to eat anyways, and it's probably kind of a premium night for deliveries. I said, hey, let's go out. We didn't have the kids that night too. They were with their other parents. I said, hey, let's do Uber Eats together. And it'll be helpful because with an adult, like when it's hard to park certain places, like you can't send our 14-year-old like into a restaurant by yourself or in the car by yourself, but you can do that with me. So we could kind of tag team. It will be quick and it'll be fun. And I actually wanted to like hand out roses or something fun. And then I was like, that might be too, it's going to like ding his ratings. And people might be like, oh, this creepy person like brought me a rose with my food on Valentine's Day. Anyways, so we did it. And the reason I call Uber Eats a shit show is because my goodness, the amount of like cancellations, like like the restaurant didn't get your order, like you're waiting, like it's just not a smooth process. It's still got a lot of hiccups that like aren't really anyone's fault per se. Who knows where in the chain of events things break down. I went to the Shake Shack at Lenox Mall that night and they're like, we have people coming up. There were like other rideshare drivers there too, trying to pick up orders and the restaurant's like, we don't have any rideshare orders tonight. I don't know what's going on. And I was like, well, we definitely came to this Shake Shack. Like, I'm sure we're at the right place. It just was like such a wait. And then it gets canceled. It's just like, and you waste your time. It's just a lot of like running around and it's really inefficient and you don't make as much money in the end anyways. And it's just a lot of hassle. But I will say it was fun. Like we spent like 3 hours together in the car that night. We should do it again sometime. I kind of forgot that we did that.
Well, and then we used that money to treat ourselves to a dinner out next week. So it was fun. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed doing it with you. And I think you got the craziest of, I mean, Valentine's night, I think was just a really crazy night for people ordering. So it was just even more weird than usual. But
I did wish that one guy, it was on Emory's campus. We were delivering something to like a frat house and I did wish him a happy Valentine's Day. And I think it was me. And I think he was like a little, freaked out's the wrong word, but he probably was like, who's this middle-aged woman that just delivered me my food and wished me happy Valentine's Day?
Well, yeah, and it was under my account too. So he was expecting a man named Greg and got a woman. So yeah, a beautiful woman named Maggie.
Well, happy Valentine's Day surprise. But yeah, it was fun. I just thought it was like a fun dynamic too. And that's like a new definition of a cheap date. I always say like I'm a cheap date. Like I don't need a lot to be wooed or wowed. I actually am like more impressed. Like when we first met, Greg, I was really impressed that you drove a Prius. You know, I don't need you to drive something like flashy. It's ironic we're talking about a Tesla, but I'm a cheap date. Like, and that's like the definition of a cheap date. Like, right, like we're making money on Valentine's
Yeah, I mean,
Day.
exactly. It's like the inverse of a cheap date. You know, you make me money when I take you on a date. I mean, that's
okay. On that note, we're getting into some awkward territory. Let's wrap this episode up. This has been a long one, but long awaited too. People really had been. We teased it enough. I don't know if what people thought we were doing with the Tesla to be able to expense it or depreciate it. And now you know, Greg's been doing some ride sharing, and he will either continue to or he'll bail on it eventually, and then we'll repay the retroactive. You know, I don't know. There's some form
recapture. I think is
recapture.
the term.
Recapture it. Well, thank you for joining this discussion, Greg.
Well, no, you're welcome, and thanks for your support and me kind of going out and doing some rideshare driving and getting the Tesla, which I think we both love now, and could do a whole episode on that. But I mean, it wouldn't really meet the your goals of inside out money. But
right.
But it's a fun vehicle. But
on that note, I will say I would never have called myself a car person or really said I loved a car. It is really fun to drive the Tesla. Like it's just a beautiful car to drive. Like it drives, I don't even know the words for it, but it like hugs corners. And it's the closest I've ever kind of owned to like a sports car. Like it's a pretty low riding car and it like hugs corners. I mean, I was like, when you first got it, I was like, I'm going to get a speeding ticket in this thing. Like it's just so fun to drive. It's so quiet on the inside. And we drive it in chill mode, which is where you can like turn down the acceleration basically. And it's still like that thing, just the pickup on it, it's really fun car to drive. I enjoy driving.
Yeah.
When
all that while, driving a vehicle that's supporting, the sustainability and, moving towards a sustainable energy infrastructure. So
it is aligned with my values, which is why I wanted it in the first place. I didn't even realize it would be such a fun car to drive. So, okay. Thank you all for listening. If you have been challenged or inspired by what you've heard today, please share this episode with a friend or family member, perhaps somebody who you want to encourage to buy a Tesla. Who knows?
Or to start rideshare driving.
Oh,
Well,
Actually,
I'm
that's a
happy
great
to
point.
answer questions if anyone is curious about that.
We always appreciate if you rate and review the show, or you can subscribe to make sure that you never miss an episode. And like Greg said, if you have any thoughts or questions, we always love to hear from you. You can text us or leave us a voicemail at 404-981-3370, or you can hit us up on Instagram. And if you have any specific ride sharing questions, feel free to send them in and I will route them to Greg and I'll be your liaison. I'll get you back an answer.
Sounds good.
Okay. Thanks, Greg.
Thank you.
Bye, Greg.
Bye, Maggie.